Good morning, everyone. This next lesson is on patterns in algebra for grade 7, lesson 22, that's found on page 90. This is a continuation of our last lesson where we're talking about graphing again. And this time, they're going to be giving us rules, and we're going to be putting those down onto graphs. So when we last talked about, if I give you a sequence, you can turn that into a t-table. If you know how to use a t-table, you can turn that into a graph. And if you have a graph, you can turn that back into a t-table. What they're doing now is they're saying, okay, we're going to give you a rule. You need to figure out what does a t-table look like and then turn that into a graph. So we're just adding layers and layers and layers to feeling more and more comfortable with understanding how to use graphs. So the rule I've given you is 6x plus 2. And you're supposed to evaluate this expression with inputs 1 through 5. Okay, so this is my inputs, my x's, 1 through 5. And then I figured out what is my output when I do this question. So I put 1 into this equation. I said 6 times 1 equals 6 plus 2 is 8. 2 times 6 is 12 plus 2 is 14. 3 times 6 is 18 plus 2 is 20. And what you'll notice actually is I have a gap right here. My gap is always the same number, and my gap will always be the number I am multiplying the input by. So this will always be 6. Right? And once I've determined my first one, as long as I know what my gap is, I could probably just actually keep going. I could go on for a very long time if I'd want to. I don't want to though. But this is what my t-table will look like if I'm given a rule. And then this is what my graph's going to look like. I had a hard time figuring out what I wanted my scale to be, so I just chose to be increments of 8. I know it's not ideal, but it works. I labeled my graph A, not very inventive, but it's still a title. I said that this is my X or my inputs, and this is my outputs or my Y, and then I graphed my information. This is what this page is going to be asking you to do. So they're going to give you the rule, you turn it into a t-table, and then from that t-table you got to turn it into a graph. Sometimes they'll give you the graph, then you have to turn it into a t-table and then find the rule, or vice versa. But we want to understand, how do we go through this process when you are creating your graphs, because eventually you're going to have to create graphs. I think on number 3, yeah, the last 3 questions of this page. Make sure you label your graphs, please. Like what I did. There should always be 3 labels on every graph. There should always be a title. The title should always be included a labeled x-axis and a labeled y-axis. Right? So those are the 3 labels that you should find on every single graph. It's very important for us to do. Just like in other classes, when you have to do those sorts of rhythms, this is an important thing to do. But yeah, please do all the questions on page 90. I hope you have a productive day.